Well, Representative Heather Scott, thank you so much for joining us. And you are going to talk to us about the importance of citizen activism. And this is like your wheelhouse. You do it all day long. So I figured it'd be easy for you to do today. And people, of course, always need to hear it.
Well, thank you, Misty. And it's great to be on with you guys. And it's great to see new activists out there, because that's ultimately what I always try to remind citizens is all power is in the people. And if you exercise that power, it's amazing how much government changes. And so I applaud you for wanting to pursue that. Some things I always remind people in general, we get the government we allow. And ultimately, we always want to blame government, and we always are angry or frustrated with government, but we allow what we get. And the other part of that is that elections have consequences. And, you know, we're seeing what's happening with the tyranny across our state, and it happened overnight. It appears to happen overnight, but our complacency has allowed what's happened in some of the decisions that's being made at a statewide level to invade every one of our daily lives and our freedoms. It didn't just happen overnight, and elections do have consequences. So I'm glad you're getting involved. I'm excited. Health Freedom Idaho is a great group, and they always seem to be active. And so they've asked me to talk a little bit on how to talk to your legislators. And I'm going to start by saying you need to figure out who your legislators are. And some, you know, all this is new to me not too long ago, so it's not that hard to learn. But I think the first basic thing you need to learn is that you have 2 representatives and 1 senator that represent you. And those are also called legislators. So those terms are sometimes used interchangeably, and sometimes it's confusing. They say your legislators. Well, your legislators are your 2 representatives and your senator. And how do you know who those are? You have to figure out what district you live in. And the districts are set up across the state. There's 35 districts. And there's a place online, if you go to my website, I think you can link to it, that you can find out what district you live in and who your legislators are. And that's the first thing you got to determine is who they are. That being said, just about the time you figured it out, and for all of us who have figured it out, it's going to change this year, because every 10 years, they change the lines and they mix it all up and they change the district numbers. So you may be in District 22 this year, and you may be in District 17 next year. But that your new number will be good for 10 years, and that will be your district. So I caution you that in this is 2020, so it will be changing in 2022. So after in 2 years, your district will change. So just about the time you think you've got your legislators listening to you, you might get new ones. So something to remember in talking to legislators is they're not rock stars. They're not superstars. They're not rock stars. Even though some of them think they are, they're just people. They're just regular people like you and me. They're just regular people that happen to get motivated to step up and maybe run for office or make change. And that being said, they don't know everything. And sometimes they might want you to think they know everything, but they don't know everything. But they like the appearance that they do. So that is key, I think, is they don't like to look stupid. And a lot of times I hear feedback from citizens. They say, well, they're not listening. They won't listen. Or they won't speak up, or they won't stand up. A lot of legislators are afraid to speak up or stand up or basically make a statement unless they know all the facts, because they don't want to look stupid. They want to keep that image that you know they're smart. And so that's one thing I think to keep in mind as you're dealing with these people. They're just regular people, but they They don't want to look stupid. Their lives are, I mean, to give them some credit, their lives are like open to everybody. So they're in a kind of a weird position, and even though they sometimes they're not making bad decisions, because maybe they're making a bad decision because they don't know the facts. Maybe they do know the facts and that's just where they stand, but you have to figure that out, and that's your job as a citizen to figure out, why are they making the decisions? Have they been educated to the point where they can make an educated decision? And is that decision, is it protecting my freedoms, or is it hurting or harming me? So those are things, it's just little things to keep in mind. You may want to know what party they're in. That sometimes makes a difference, because it's a good starting point to where their principles lie. So the next thing to know is kind of, you want to be able to talk their language a little bit. And I think on the call later, you're going to hear, just some of the terminology. It's like a different world, the legislature. They talk different. There's different processes, and I think we're going to talk about that later in the call. So when you do talk to a legislator, you don't want to sound uneducated. Especially on your issue, you will be educated, but you don't want to sound uneducated, and that means knowing the authority of your legislator. What is the role of a legislator? Is the legislator's job to fix potholes on your county road? Probably not. But I can tell you, I get a lot of calls about potholes. Is your legislator's job to you have to know their authority and what they can actually do. So that's another thing, and I don't know if we'll have time to get into that deep, but maybe if there's some questions on that. The other thing that's good when conversing and talking to legislators or any elected official is know what their schedule looks like. And I can tell you, with the schedule for legislators, we are in session 3 months a year. And what session means is that's when everybody from the state, from all the different areas, go down to Boise and vote on laws. And we're voting on laws for 3 months straight, and there's over 600 or 700 bills that we're looking at and reading. And like I said, we're not experts on everything. So I'll be voting on hospital legislation, on vaccinations, on septic systems, the whole gamut. And you're put in that role to make decisions, and you want to make educated decisions. So remember, if you want to talk to your legislator and it's during January, February, March, they may have some other things on their mind, and it might be hard to be able to persuade them on your issue. The other thing I suggest is you need to build a relationship with your legislators. Don't wait until you have a problem to contact your legislators. You need to build that relationship with them, so when you do have a problem, you can go to them and they know who you are, they trust you, there's some kind of a relationship built. There's ways to do that. Maybe don't call them or email them, or maybe don't bother them while they're in session unless it's an immediate issue you need to address. If you don't want them to vote a certain way on a bill, or you have a problem with a statement they made in public, that's one thing. But if you're serious concerned about property taxes in general, you want to get to know your legislator, you want to build a relationship, ask them out for coffee, ask them if they have time for a phone call, go to their events. The one thing about the Idaho state legislators, every senator and every representative is up for election every other year. So they're 2-year terms. So literally, you could clean house in 1 year. You could replace 105 legislators and get a brand new legislative body. That being said, they're almost always campaigning or having events. So a good way to really get to know a legislator is maybe host an event for them. Say, hey, I want to invite my neighbors over and we want to just talk to you in general or get to know you better. That's a good way to build a relationship. And maybe don't put any pressure on them of what you want yet, but just to get to know them, because they're going to need your help in the election. And so Or maybe you want to show them how influential you are. When 50 people show up to your house for a barbecue, you invite them. Maybe not so much that you agree with them, but you want people to get to know them, and you want them to know your concerns. Pay attention to your legislators. There's some really good resources out there that I'm sure Health Freedom Idaho can point you to, that you can actually follow their track record and their voting record. Sometimes you'll get lip service. I cannot tell you the times I've had people call me and say that they were told that their legislator voted against something, and I knew better. And I said, you better check their voting record. And they said, well, they said it passed and they were happy. I said, check their voting record. And they will give you lip service and tell you what you want them to hear. So you need to follow up. The one thing I've learned in politics, a lot of people lie. Even legislators, they will lie. They'll lie to your face. They will do it. So you really have to check things and confirm and build that relationship. So then once you build that relationship, figure out what you want from them and what they need from you. And you know, they need help. My guess is they need help. If your concern is child vaccinations or parental rights, what is super helpful for legislators is talking points. Talking points that are bulleted. Not, you know, I remember like the first time I got in and someone gave me this thick book and like all these notes, and they said, here, now that we got a good one, I want you to fix this. And I'm like, you don't have time. That's the one thing your legislators don't have, is a lot of time. So any chance that you can get to talk to them, make sure you've got your talking points down, make sure you're concise in your thoughts and what you want to say or what you need from them. And that's something else. So figure out, do you need a government fix? Do you need a bill passed? Have you tried to fix your problem on your own, or are you just calling your legislator because you kind of just want someone to fix it for you? A lot of times, people will call me, but they haven't done any of their own homework. It's really good if you try to pursue the agencies. I've got, over this last COVID issue, I've had so many people call me on unemployment. And unless you have spent the time and pushed back or fought and done your part of the job, it's really hard for me to just jump into a middle of a situation and put pressure on government that's treating you bad if you have not done your homework or done your part of the job. I'm not sure if that makes sense. Give me a nod if that makes sense. You need to help your legislator, not just depend on them to fix your problem. That is one thing legislators do. They do have access to the directors and you know, but you have to try to deal with them on your own. Administrative rules are critical, as I think might be mentioned or is mentioned. That's with all the executive agencies. And when your legislators write their bills, the more specific they are at writing their bills, the less the executive branch gets to write their rules about the bills. So anytime you do go to your legislator and ask them to write a bill, make sure you are very crystal clear on exactly what you want out of that bill. It's really not that hard to write a bill. People will just give me an idea. Sometimes I just sign a permission slip and they can have me a bill usually written within 24 hours. So if you've got an idea, I encourage you to talk to your legislator about it. Ask them if they will at least draft you up a bill. They might not be interested in running it, but they might be interested in drafting it. Let's see. Another way to build that relationship with your legislators are central committees. If you go to your central committees, a lot of times your legislators are giving monthly reports, and it's a good time to ask them questions or get to know them, or maybe say, I appreciate what you said up there. You'll get some one-on-one time when they're there out in public. Donating always gets their attention. So that's something that always does get their attention. And then help them set up an event, I told you, and then thank them. If your legislator does something that you appreciate or you notice, thank them. Another thing that catches their attention is if you watch them on the House floor. If there's an important vote, you can watch everything that happens in Boise online. And if there's a really important vote and they don't speak up on your behalf, you may just call and say, hey, I was watching on the House floor. I was hoping that you were going to stand up and say something about our district. This really affects a lot of us in our district. It would be nice if you would speak out more for us. So sometimes they need that nudging. I could go on. I don't know how much I'm going on time, but I think that covers some of the basics about your legislators. Is that good, Misty?
Yes, absolutely. I was remembering when I first got started and I met with you and then Representative Ron Nate, and he said to me something that stuck with me, and I think that it'll help other people. He said it really was upsetting to him when the only people that he was hearing from is the lobbyists. And how sad is that people have grown so complacent that our legislators are sometimes only hearing from lobbyists. So that really put in perspective to me how little citizens were actually being active. And absolutely, if the only people legislators hear from are the lobbyists who are getting paid to influence our legislators, then we are getting the government that we deserve because we're not taking part.
Well, and I will comment on that just a bit. You know, when we're in Boise, there's a lobby event. There's 2 or 3 lunches and 2 or 3 dinners every day to choose from. And it's very convenient because you've worked your butt off for 6 or 8 hours or 12 hours and you just want to go unwind, and there's somebody has a meal in front of you. You're going to have a presentation on what their issues are. Or when you need an expert. I mean, when I'm voting on a dentist bill, I don't know much about dentists, and so when I have a lobbyist that says, well, here's what the bill does, here's why people don't like it, and here's why people do like it. I'm hearing both sides of that bill, but I'm not hearing the citizen part of that bill. And that's the problem. And I get it. Citizens are busy trying to work so they can pay their taxes, so they can put more good government. I mean, it's just this vicious cycle. But the citizens really need to be engaged in that, because we do rely on lobbyists when we're down there, because you're just not an expert on these issues, and these people are nice to you. They take you out to dinner, or they come to your office. They just, hey, can I have 5 minutes of your time? Here's the bill. Here's the problem we have with it. You learn something, and that's why I say it's critical to follow these bills and to be able to point out issues with them and educate your legislator in simple bullet forms on why it's a bad bill for you, the citizen. And there's starting points. Not every bill does a whole bunch of bad, but there's some great starting points. One of the websites, Growing Freedom, every bill is tracked, and it just says, does this help citizens? Does this hurt citizens? Or does it neutral? And so if you can just follow that and maybe just get involved, it's super. So thank you, Misty.
Yeah, absolutely. And the only thing I would add to that, just drawing from our experiences, and I know Sarah will relate to this, is getting the runaround. When we try to go and meet with our legislators, we've called, they're so packed, they can't meet today, they have this thing and that thing. Or, and then you finally do get in and you get lip service and they're telling you one thing, and then you get into the voting committee and they voted against what they told you that they would do. And so expect that. I think I had no idea, because I sort of take people at face value, that I would be given the runaround in that way. Like, for example, it's not important if you go to that committee hearing, nothing's going to be decided. You can't even testify anyway. These are like the ones I've heard now repeated by everybody. And it is important to be there, because let's say it's a print hearing where you can't testify anyway. You're still hearing the arguments from both sides and preparing for your arguments for when you can do it, when you can testify. So it is important to be at each and every meeting that has to do, or at least be listening online. But when somebody tells you it is not important to be there, that's my, like, ding, 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 I must be there.
That's good.
Okay, Christy Zito is one of the most accessible legislators, and that's what I love about her. That's why I thought it would be really good for her to talk about the best way for people to approach their legislator. How do we email Christy? Should the email look like? Should we go into long details? And what do you think about holding legislators accountable? How do you like to see that happen? What do you think works? What is effective?
Well, I think what is effective is different for every legislator, but I know for me, and this has got to be pretty close across the board, I'm just a person just like everyone else. So talk to me just like you would anybody else. Talk to me like you would if you were going to go over across the street and talk to your neighbor about their dog that barks all night long or something like that. Now, granted, if the dog's barking all night long and you haven't slept, you might be not in the best mood when you get there. But be that as it may, your legislators deserve your respect. And something that I really respect when someone comes to me to talk to me about an issue, and I get calls from all over, you know, every district except like Heather's district and Ron's district and stuff like that. Those people know they have a legislator that's accessible, so they don't. But I get calls from people all over. But if you have a problem, and I did this when I was on the school board also, because people would come to you and they'd say, well, this needs to be fixed and that needs to be changed and this just isn't right. And I would say, you know, that's great. I can see what you're saying, but bring me the solution to the problem when you bring the problem. Don't just come to me and drop it in my lap and then go off on about your merry way and think that it's my job to fix it all and make it better. Because there's, I don't know how many million plus citizens in the state of Idaho, and I represent my district. I represent the people in my district, and I'll work for people outside of my district. But you have to come to me with the solution to the problem. You can't just come and say, this is what's wrong, fix it, because we're not working together that way. And I think that's really important, because a good legislator, I think, is busy all the time. A good legislator tries to take phone calls from people that call them and contact them about what's important to them. Now, another thing that I've noticed since I've been in the legislature is sometimes people will call with a problem, and they'll call, you think they're going to complain, and they'll vent, and they might swear and scream and holler and everything. But sometimes people just want to know that someone's listening. They want to know that someone really cares enough to just answer the phone. And it's okay to do that too. And when you have a legislator or representative that will do that, appreciate them for that. And once in a while, let them know that you care. I think that's important as well. Another thing that I'd like to point out is just because you have access to a representative, a legislator, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have influence over them. And I find that people have more influence. Everybody can have a level of access, but you will always have more influence if you've researched what it is you want to talk about, if you go and you stay on point, if you take something written or send an email in advance so that they have a chance to read it and review it and know what it is you want to talk about when you get there, or correspond in email that same way. But it's really important to stay on point, and it's really important to remember, especially during the session, that, you know, we are busy on the run from committee meetings to session, except all day long probably, except for that maybe hour that we have for lunch. At least this has been my experience. And then sometimes I won't leave the Capitol until really, really late at night, because I don't usually go to a lot of the dinners and receptions and stuff that there are, because I don't work for the lobbyists, I work for you. And lobbyists can sometimes have some really good information and you can learn a lot from them. But it's important to always learn both sides, because they are getting paid to influence you. They are getting paid to present to you the side of the argument of the person who's writing their check. And that's important to remember. So when you hear something that's coming up, you have to follow what happens in the legislature so that you know this. Then if you don't agree with it, it's important to get good, valid, real information to your representative so that they have both sides of the argument, so that they can see both sides of an issue. And I think that's important as well. And be respectful of their time. So what was the other thing you wanted me to, oh, why is it important to hold them accountable? Well, when I decided to run for office, there was my daughter, one other gal, and a couple of, just a real close circle. And we made a pact with each other that if I started to get off the path that we had set, and if I started to get away from the goals that we could see, you know, obeying my oath of office, we have a list of things when I look at legislation, you know, just because something's moral or legal doesn't mean it's moral. Who does it help? Who does it hurt? Who's it going to cost? And so every piece of legislation gets laid against those, gets measured against those 7 rules. And we have an agreement that if I start to get off that path, that they're going to bring me back into line. And the reason that's important is because everybody goes there with good intentions. And one of my favorite lobbyists, and I think he might be Heather's favorite lobbyist as well, my first year he came to me and he said, you'll never be better than you are your first year, because that's the year you care the most. But so because he told me that, I worked really hard to make sure that I don't lose that zeal for really representing the people that sent me there. So I focus on that all the time. But it's important to hold people in office accountable, because if you don't, if they don't know you're watching, if they don't know you care, and if that is not witnessed at the ballot box, then they think what they're doing is all right and you're okay with it. But if they vote, let's say we have an abortion bill come up or a gun bill, those are both, you know, those are pretty black and white. You either think abortion's wrong or you don't think it's wrong. Gun law the same way, either the Second Amendment shall not be infringed, or you can infringe on it a little bit for the sake of safety. There's not a lot of gray area there. It's pretty black and it's pretty white. If your representative makes a vote that you're not happy with, you need to let them know. And you need to let your neighbors know, and they need to let their neighbors know. I took a campaign class once that they told us that every one person that you talk to will have contact with 7 others on that issue. Or every one person you talk to about a representative, an elected official, they will have contact with 7 other people about that representative. And that might be at the grocery store, it might be at church, it might be a family member, that spreads pretty fast. So it's important that you know what's going on. It's important that you know the votes that they're taking. It's important that you build a relationship so that you can contact them. It's important that you don't take advantage of their time, because time is precious and time is short. And don't take what my uncle used to say, don't use 10 hits on the nail when it only takes 2. So just get to the point, tell them what they need to know, what's important to you, and then respect their time. So, you know, I so agree with everything that everybody said here tonight, that we have the government we deserve, and we have been complacent for a long time in the situations that we're seeing this year, like with the COVID and like with what we consider the governor's overreach and stuff. Those pieces of legislation weren't just passed last year. The pieces of legislation that are making happen what we see happen have been in the making for a long time. And little by little by little, we have watched our legislature more or less give up a lot of their power to the executive branch. And I think one of the most egregious places we see that are in the bureaucratic agencies. Our Constitution in Idaho is very specific about how many agencies there should be. And it said if there are more than that, they should be temporary and they should only last for a period of 2 years. We have well over 200 agencies and boards and on and on and on. And every one of those are staffed with people who are appointed by the governor. And every one of them have the full force and effect of law in your life. And I think that's something that when we get through this year, get the governor's power reined in, get the legislature back on a more equal footing, because we're 3 equal branches of government. We really need to look at the bureaucratic agencies, and it will take a lot of citizen involvement. We'll need people who are willing to go through all of those rules and look at them and ask, why is this here? What effect does it have? And what do we need to do to change it? So thank you for asking me to do this tonight. I appreciate it. It's been great.
Christy, can you speak to when people email, so Health Freedom Idaho, for example, we often do here's what to email, here's the issue, here's the issues about the issue, right? And so people can just copy and paste the email and send it to their legislators. How do you receive emails like that? Because of course, people don't know what to say, and they'll say, well, what do I say? And so then we'll give an example email, they'll copy and paste it. We always encourage them to start it off with a little bit of their own, input of how it would affect them personally. But when you get emails like that, I've heard legislators say, oh, I just throw it in the trash because it's the same email over and over. I've also heard people say, I put it in a folder so I can sort of see how many I'm getting of those, so I can track how many I'm getting. What do you do with those?
Well, I'm kind of that way with a form email. If you know it's going to just say the same thing over and over and over, you just put it in a folder and kind of keep track of how many you get in favor of an issue and how many you get against an issue. Because it's a waste of time and energy to read the same form email over and over and over. Convention of States people are horrible for that. I mean, even now, you'll get 4 or 5 a day. And then if they decide to run that again, you'll get maybe 100 a day. So you're just not going to read them. But an email that comes to me from someone, like I said, that, tells me their story, tells me their experience, but it's brief and to the point, those I read. I really even sometimes like emails when we have a hot topic that we're going to vote on. I get a lot of emails that will say, vote yes, or vote no, or don't support this, or don't support that. And I really appreciate those as well, because I know in both cases, those emails are heartfelt. I know that that person understands that a legislator has a lot on their plate during the session, and that, just letting them know briefly where you stand makes a lot of difference in my mind, because I've been swayed before by keeping a tally of emails that I get from people or phone calls that I get from people. And then I'll look at the issue, and then again, I'll wait, is it constitutional? Who does it help? Who does it hurt? Does it increase taxes? Those 7 things, I usually keep that hanging on my wall so that I don't forget it. So again, just brief and to the point, share your experience. I always love that, because I've even shared those experiences on the floor before when I've given testimony. I love reading letters and sharing the experiences of the people of our state when they send them, because I think that should be as impactful to other legislators when they're deciding and weighing in their mind how they should vote and how they should not, as anything. I mean, to vote for something because it's going to get you a chairmanship, why are you there? That's pretty sad to think that people will sell their integrity just to say that they're a chairman of a committee, or to say that they have some leadership position, because I know that's not why I went there. I know that there are others that would agree with that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they don't just sell their integrity, they sell their constituents out. Yes. Representative Heather Scott, do you have anything to add to that as far as the emails, receiving emails? Do you like bullet points? How do you sort it out when you receive a copy and paste email? Do you like it in the subject line, vote no or vote yes?
Yeah, the shorter the better. That's huge, just because we do get so much to read. It's always nice to know if they're in my district. I pay more attention, and I think most people do, if they know you're in the district, because quite frankly, the people in Boise probably do not feel the same way about guns as the people in North Idaho feel. And I'm probably going to lean towards I will lean towards North Idaho over how Boise feels about guns. And so that makes a bigger difference. So if you're building up an activist team across the state, it's really a good idea to have the key towns from those districts. And you know, maybe because there's going to be a district change, as you organize them by the town name, and then you say, I'm from Twin Falls, and I want you to vote no. That's helpful. You know, calls, I think one thing I'll mention about calls is we are only in our offices 3 months out of the year, unless you live down in Boise and go into the office. So I'll get down to Boise and I'll have 130 phone messages from people who are calling me in Boise. To me, they're important and I'll eventually get through them, but they don't understand the system enough to know I'm not even there. So that's one thing to keep in mind when they're there, when they're not there. So calls are important, but the problem, like Christy, keep them short. Christy said about keeping letters short, keeping calls short. Some days I will take 60 to 70 calls, and I try to keep track of all those calls. I think what's helpful is when you meet your legislator or you talk to them, you introduce yourself, say, hey, I'm Misty. I'm the one that contacted you earlier about vaccinations. Anytime you can kind of remind them who you are, because that's helpful, and where you're from, that's really helpful. And then in person, always building, I truly believe building that relationship. Like Christy said, you can get time, but influence and time are two different things. And the influence you can build by getting to know your legislator is huge. And when they trust you, you might not know a bill's coming up, and they may call you because you're the expert on, sewage. I don't know, sewage plants or something. Whatever it is you're the expert on, maybe pharmaceuticals. They're going to call you because in their notes, all they know is you've helped them with this issue before. So I truly think that you do want to put pressure when you need to put pressure. You do want to do lit drops when you really want to draw attention in that, but you definitely, if you've got decent legislators, they may be voting wrong because they're uneducated. Mm-hmm. And so you have to educate them. And then if they choose to vote wrong, replace them. But you can educate them and move them in the right direction sometimes easier than just getting a new one every 2 years, and the district keeps spitting out bad legislators. So, and sometimes it's really hard to get rid of an incumbent. So if you're going to have them, some of these people have been there 15 years, they're probably going to be hard to get rid of unless they vote bad on a gun bill. You might want to try to influence them. So I hope
that's true. I have a story about that. So when we first started talking about the difference between having influence or having time, Senator Hyder, he said, oh, yes, I'll be glad to carry your bill. This was when we were new, and we wanted to bring that rule in line with statute regarding the vaccine form, the parent form to schools. And so we said, oh, yes, I'll carry your bill. We're chatting all summer. I have his cell phone number. He's super kind. I think this is all going to work out. And I'm thinking, what better person to have carry our bill than the chairman of the Health and Welfare Committee, which he was at the time. Well, I thought, oh, this is great, Well, we get a print hearing, and his committee voted to hear the bill, and then and we got a bill number, and then he put the bill directly in the drawer. His own bill, directly in the drawer. So this is the kind of shenanigans they can play. Now, we had to decide, what are we going to do about that? Well, we did a lit drop, and the fact of the matter is Senator Hyder is never going to vote in our favor regarding health freedom. So we decided that it was worth doing a lit drop in his district and notifying his constituents about what he did. Well, the good thing about that is that he was no longer chairman of the Health and Welfare Committee the next session. So that was effective in one way. It did also inspire someone to run against him, which, even though we didn't get him out of his seat, which, you know, that would have been obviously the best thing, it did get him out of the chairman seat and put him on notice that somebody is willing to run against him. And nobody had run against him in quite some time. So it gets that person, that legislator, thinking, I need to start doing the right thing, or my position it could go away. So anyway, I think that is when you use it. But like everybody is saying here, and I'll reiterate it, we would never do such a thing to someone who we think we can educate on our point. Fred Martin isn't going to vote in our direction. Hyder's not going to vote in our direction. And those are the people that we've done lit drops on. But we have other legislators who may not always vote on the side of freedom, but would actually be willing to hear what we have to say about, say, the vaccine issue. And we'll take the time, obviously, to do that. So obviously the lit drop is to be used on certain occasions or certain reasons, but it's not the go-to every time. You have to think about it. Can I educate my legislator? And that brings me to the next point, is when I did create relationships with these legislators, like Representative Heather Scott, Representative Ron Nate, Representative Priscilla Giddings. When I created relationships with these legislators, I noticed that they opened and read my emails. And before I had those relationships, I felt like I was sending emails that was just going out into the abyss. But because they knew who I was and they'd see my email and they'd go, oh, Misty, yeah, well, what does she have to say about this bill? And so I think when you create that relationship, they at least care about what you have to say about it, because they know that you're their constituent. Doesn't mean that they're going to vote the way you want them to vote, but I think they're more likely to open your email and read it because they know you, they've seen your face, they know that you're involved, and they know that you're in their district. Does that make sense?
Yes, Misty, and if I can just add to something you mentioned, running candidates against elected officials. This is super, super effective to get, sometimes, I guess the big thing about the party system and the committee system is what they're designed to do is protect your legislators so they are not on the record. So if there's a controversial issue, the committee system will protect them by not allowing that bill to come up in committee so they don't have to be on the record on that issue. The one thing you can do to thwart that is to run candidates against these squishy legislators to get them on the record. And sometimes you don't need to run candidates just to win. You just need to run candidates so there are forums and you can show the difference between liberty and non-liberty, or you just need to show the difference in the balance there. And it is huge. And the other thing it does is it helps when there's candidates running against every legislator in the state, the establishment and the lobbyists have to choose where they're going to put their money. And they usually sometimes will leave alone people like Christy or I if they're concentrated on busy and keeping one of their people in office. Otherwise, if there's no challengers across the state, they start throwing money against good liberty folks that are actually voting for your interest. So I can't tell you how critical it is to run candidates against any legislator that is not working for the people. It is critical. And it doesn't have to be the best candidate. It just has to be someone willing to step up, put their name in the hat, and show up at these forums and show a difference in the direction that they could go.
Awesome, thank you for that. And Sarah Clendenin is a shining star example of that, because she has ran against Fred Martin twice now, And she just, you know, cannot stand for him to run unopposed because it does bring these things to the surface, which I totally appreciate.